Hey, this is Mike.
Charles Woods.
And we've got another live video version of our podcast. And, all right, so if I said, put your weight on it. You rat soup eating
Rat
mother.
soup eating, yeah, right.
What comes to mind, Charles?
Dolemite, I tell you. Here's a guy, I learned he had diabetes. And he came by the store a couple of times. He could barely walk. And he seemed like an old man. But once he got in front of the people, he was somebody different because that turned him on, you know what I mean? And then he started going into his rap act.
Yeah, well, he was the king of the toast.
Rudy Ray Moore.
And Rudy Ray Moore, a.k.a. Dolemite, legendary West Coast comedian. And, you know, if you're talking about independent filmmakers and just having audacity, you know, here's a guy, he couldn't sing, he couldn't rap, he couldn't act, but he put out records, he put out movies, and he had a long career in show business. And what's really, the reason we're talking about him today is because a video label called Vinegar Syndrome has just reissued the four seminal Dolemite movies, remastered them not only in DVD, but in Blu-ray as combo packs with tons of extras. And Charles and I had a chance to preview these things, and we'll go through the lineage. You know, so what more can you say about Rudy Ray Moore? I can give you some facts. He was born in
I'll tell you,
Arkansas in 1927, and he passed away in 2008 at the age of 81.
Well, Rudy Ray Moore's films, it's interesting because what happens is he is a clear example of how you can profit over the zeitgeist. You know, blaxploitation, it was a time when people wanted to see themselves on the screen in a heroic way. You know, for too long, as I said, growing up, all I would see is if anybody did me wrong, if Whitey did me wrong, I couldn't do anything about it on that screen. I couldn't hit back or anything. If anyone had to take up my cause, it had to be the white hero. And so we had it in kung fu movies, and then in blaxploitation films, we had the underdog rising on top, and they made money. And all of a sudden, people say, oh, man, this stuff is selling. Throw something together, put me some NIGGR stuff together. Let's capitalize on this. Now, Rudy Ray Moore was popular as a rapper. He's doing what they would call the ghetto circuit.
Well, Party Records. He was one of the original guys, along with Red Fox and other people, that basically put out dirty records and were sold under the counter at record stores. Did you have a few Rudy Ray Moore?
Oh, yeah, because we used to love the risque covers they had.
Yeah, well, Rudy Ray Moore, he took it one further than Red Fox, because all his covers were rated X, and
Wild Man Steve
positioned himself as a ladies' man in all the covers, and you know, but his main and there's a very interesting documentary, called The Legend of Dolemite, which was put out by Xenon. But what's really cool in this Blu-ray set, it's 4 different DVDs that you can buy individually, and as a bonus on each one, there's a 20-minute version of a new documentary called Dolemite, which basically traces his career from basically a guy who was an assistant manager at Dolphin's record store in Los Angeles. You know, he had aspirations to be a recording artist. Like if you go all the way back to like the late 50s, he's singing jump blues. You know, he's like a Louis Jordan or you know, like a smooth Charles Brown kind of like West Coast R&B singer. But then he didn't really make it in show business. We always had a foot in the door in show business. And then one day, this drunk guy came in and he started doing toasts. And he's like the neighborhood wino, and he would do these toasts, and the signifying monkey and the Dolemite raps were the things that everybody would remember and he'd laugh at. And Rudy Ray Moore, he said, hey, you know, I got an idea. Why don't you come over to my house? And he got him drunk, and he basically had the guy do all his routines into a tape recorder, and then he took the tape recorder and went into a nightclub and started doing the act. Became a million seller. He started pressing his own records, and it actually charted on Billboard, the first Dolemite album, and then from there it was off to the races. And this is like 1970 or so when that first Dolemite record came out. And by 1975, Rudy Ray Moore said, well, what's the next thing we can do? We can make a movie. Mm-hmm. And he took $100,000 of his own money, and he had a gentleman, Derville Martin, who you can fill us in on.
Well, Derville Martin is someone, he wanted to be in acting. It was difficult. There's some films he did. A lot of people don't even know he was in them. But the thing is, Derville became more popularly known as the good friend of Fred Williamson when they would do their films.
Sidekick with a nigger
Sidekick, yeah. Boss Nigger. Mm-hmm. Even Derville helped produce The Final Come Down with Billy D. Williams. Mm-hmm. But and then he was part producer of Disco 9000, and he did some directing. But he's someone on a certain level.
There was a certain scene going on.
Yeah,
at
a certain
time.
level he got into production as well.
Right, so he was hired to direct the first Dolemite movie, which is insane.
This is Rudy Ray Moore, better known as Dolemite. Now I'd like to show you just a few scenes from my latest adventure. Damn, look like my women is on time. Babe, I could sure warm you up.
No shit, baby.
I can dig it. Dolemite is my name, and f***ing up motherfuckers is my game. Breathing down your neck. Dance! Girls, this motherfucker's got rhythm, haven't he?
I always say that if I ever ran a movie studio, Dolemite would have a 5-picture deal. Because these movies, if you've never seen a Dolemite movie, they're unlike anything else that exists in cinema. I'm talking world cinema, not just American cinema. It's sort of like, maybe a stretch would be a movie like Darktown Strutters. Like you're saying, they were making so much money during the blaxploitation era that if you just made something with a bunch of black folks in it, you could get it made. Yeah. So in the first Dolemite, Dolemite is a nightclub performer, but he's in jail on trumped up charges, and the Queen Bee, along with another detective, say like, look, there's some things going on, and only you can figure out what the deal is. So we're going to let you out of jail for a few weeks, so you can find out who the real criminal is, which turns out to be Derville Martin, and get the goods on him. And
was that Mean Willie Green?
So as soon as Dolemite gets out of jail, he strips naked in front of the jail and puts on his pimp clothes, and now he's off in action. And he's in the meantime, he's being caught up on by Queen Bee, his right hand man, his bottom bitch, tells him like, look, these girls, they all know karate.
When you were doing your time, I put your girls through karate school, and they are good too. I remember one time a trick came in here and tried to misuse us.
What happened to my $100, Joe? Nigga, did you take my money?
That's right, little bitch. I took it back. You ain't worth no $100. I am Joe Blow, the lover man. You should be paying me, bitch.
Give me my money, man.
Shit, what money? Shit, I get cut like you all day, a dime a dozen, shit. Here's $2. Go get you some dish powder and keep it clean for me next time.
And they whipped his ass.
All I know, just Dolemite, technically, what made Dolemite popular was this cat was the funniest looking thing on it. His outfits, the movie, he do it, that's, people used to say, we're going to smoke us a joint, drink us some cheap wine, and we're going to put on Dolemite and have a ball. Or when we went to the movies, it was so bad it was good.
Right, but it's so bad that it's good that it's good. like, I think the first time I saw a Dolemite movie, I mean, it's just so...
Now, you saw it, what, the first time?
The first time I saw a Dolemite movie, when they first came out on VHS from Xenon Video in the late 80s.
See, your experience is different than mine.
But I was still like 12,
we're seeing them in the theater.
Okay.
And seeing it in the theater, that theater experience is where everyone's just goofing off and, oh my God, what's my man wearing? And then there's one scene where he's taking off his chest because here's a guy, when you look at him, okay? Now, I don't want to get into cultural standards, all right? But by cinema standards, one white reviewer, or a female white, I think it was Pauline Kael.
Pauline Kael had to watch Dolemite. Okay.
She said he has got to be the ugliest leading man in the history of cinema.
Now, I know you think you're smart, see, because you got all them flashy clothes, you got that big car there, you got all them black bitches working for you.
You forgot about the white ones.
You move your ass out of this town, and you move it fast. And just to show you that we mean business.
That's for fucking with me, you no business born insecure motherfuckers!
But that's the audacity of Dolemite. I mean, it's just like, it's America. You can do anything if you just put your weight on it, because this man, he not only convinced himself that he could star in a movie, but he got a whole crew of people and then a bunch of women to stand around him naked and make him a sex god for 4 movies.
There's even a scene where he takes off his shirt and my boy's got some phony hair on his chest.
All right, so moving on. So Dolemite, is a great entree into the scene. It's later blaxploitation, 1975, but it made so much money.
Yes.
That the next year they came back with what I think is the quintessential. Like if you only see one Dolemite movie in your life, you have to experience Human Tornado.
You know what's interesting? You said it made so much money, and everything's relative. But what was so much money back then?
Well, the movie only cost $100,000, so it probably made $1 million. I would guess. Enough to
maybe
put them
$3-4 million, and that was considered a lot. $4 or $5 million.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was successful enough to keep him going.
Yes.
So the quintessential Dolemite movie is Human Tornado.
I'm mean as snakes and twice as bad. But for the price of admission, I can be had. If you crave satisfaction, this is the place to find that action. Coming to this theater as its next attraction is the picture that will put you in faction, the Human Tornado.
He made me do it!
Bitch, are you for real? That motherfucker caught me in the bed with his wife. Now he want to try to take my life.
So in this one, once again, he's a pimp. And in the opening scene, he's caught in bed by the sheriff, having sex with the sheriff's wife. And so the sheriff, he's so racist and enraged that he orders his deputy to just shoot his wife dead because she's spoiled. He can't do anything. Not before he catches him in bed with his wife, and Dolemite, and he's basically a gigolo because she's like, hey, you're the best man I ever pay for. Right, so they're getting down, and all of a sudden the sheriff comes in, and he sees him in bed, and she cries rape.
Yeah.
And she said,
"Bitch,
are you
rape? You kidding, bitch?"
So he dodges, get out of the way. She gets killed. He jumps off a cliff into some bushes. So it's already fun, right? So
he jumped out of the bush and into the bushes. Huh?
Jumped out of the bush into the bush. But then you're in for a Dolemite movie because he's like, wait, y'all didn't believe I did this? I'm gonna rewind this and play it again.
So y'all don't believe I jumped, huh? So watch this good shit.
Yeah, so now Dolemite's on the run. He goes to L.A. and he hooks up with the Queen Bee, and now the mob is in on trying to get after their club. So not only does he have to fight the mob with kung fu, but he's also the sheriff is in cahoots with the local police force who's trying to catch Dolemite. So he shows up in L.A. and he's like, look, you got to get this guy. You know, he raped my wife and killed her, all that other stuff. I mean, whatever trumped up charges. So now there's a double-edged sword that he's got to fight against. And, lots of opportunities for him to rap and do all that kind of craziness and have sex with white women. And Human Tornado, he plays a character, door-to-door salesman. He's got to go to, because he's trying to find out where the mob has stolen his bitches. Like they're all in a torture. They kidnap a bunch of his hoes. Two of them, and they're in a torture chamber. And so he goes to the junkie and he says, like, look, they're in a torture chamber. It's like, well, what, tell me where they're at. And he's like, I wouldn't know, but you got to see the mob guy's wife. So he knocks on the door. He's a door-to-door salesman, a painter of erotic paintings. And I don't know where the hell they found this painting, but I know in the Reelblack world, if anybody had that exact painting, I would pay $1 million for it, because it's a piece of history. Yeah. And then he infiltrates the mob by having sex with the woman and knock the ceiling off the wall and all kinds of stuff. And the Blu-ray you got to check out, because there's a whole story about how they design the sets and all that kind of stuff.
Well, and the thing is, what made those films popular is you had the typical tropes. The kung fu, the sexy women, the black and white sex, and with what made Dolemite so popular is the rap, because a lot of guys, rap became very popular. What really is one of the reasons why you're getting Dolemite on Blu-ray, he's a cult figure, but he was so big with the rappers, the same way like Scarface. You always see this picture of Scarface and a lot of the rappers.
Yeah, Big Daddy Kane actually featured Dolemite on some records. He had a big resurgence in the 80s with the rediscovery of him on home video. And one of the things that's really important to know is that he controlled his masters. He was an astute businessman. Now, I mean, some of the movies he got the rights back because the companies went out of business, but here is a black independent filmmaker in Los Angeles who is self-producing, self-financing, and basically self-distributing not only his records, but motion pictures. Yeah. And he did so for a nice period, about 5 or 6 years. If you count the records, almost a decade, he was a self-made man.
Kind of reminiscent of what made Oscar Micheaux a success. Oscar Micheaux was into book publishing. And so he knew how, to put a product together, go on the road, sell it, and then you go from literature to the next art medium of film, and do the same thing.
And not far from what Tyler Perry has done, from taking plays and translating them to film. So in some ways he's a mogul. I mean, he never made great riches, and we'll move forward with the next film, which is Petey Wheatstraw.
The Devil's Son-in-Law.
The Devil's Son-in-Law.
Yes, I'm Petey Wheatstraw, the Devil's Son-in-Law, the High Sheriff of Hell. I went with Notorious Fanny and even made love to old Lulabelle. I took today and brought back yesterday. Took the 4th of July and put it in June. And made leap year jump over the moon.
These are unabashedly black movies, just from the pure sense that the whole Dolemite thing is based on classic toasts. It's an oral tradition that has existed in black culture for centuries. The ability to toast.
Well, you just said unabashedly black, right? And what I would tell a lot of people, what's beautiful about today's technology, it allows them to do the research that when I was doing my research years ago, the accessibility wasn't there. Now it's Google did boo 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 boo, but the thing is, Ebony, you don't have to go buy the Ebonies or I used to have to go to old bookstores to get back issues. Now you go right online.
Google.
Go and research culture or con game in Ebony, where they're discussing, is this culture or a con game? Is this really something we need to watch? But
well, I mean, if people are concerned with authorship, the black producer, black actor, black stars. I mean, probably some white money. Get $100,000 is a little tough, and then certainly white distribution. But at that point it was like a license to print money, the way they were doing these things. So the oral tradition of toasting, the Dolemite and the signified monkey are classic things. So I guess Dolemite was. And Shine on the Titanic, that's what I'm thinking of. That's another classic toast. It's about the black guy, cook on the Titanic who gets away, So in all of the Rudy Ray Moore's depictions of Dolemite, there's a level of trickster in the character where he, on some level, I mean, he's using his power and his limited acting skills to take on the man, but he's also using his guile, like in order to get inside things, such as depicted in knocking on and his sexual prowess. I mean, so
that's interesting. That's interesting. You just said the trickster, and that's how many people, when they wanted to kind of give a raison d'etre to what we got in black films, it was about, in literature, when you first had an attempt to write black literary characters, there was always a fascination with the trickster.
Now listen, I can figure out a way to keep from marrying the devil's daughter, but the main thing we got to deal with Leroy and Skillet right now.
But Petey, I'm scared. Now you know how powerful the devil is, and if you cross him, he's gonna be mad as hell. I mean, heaven. Oh, shit.
Oh, Nell, you always worry. Now you know I can take care of things.
Blacks have always found a way to get over, get over on the man and whatnot. And the trickster, that was what was popular in a lot of these blaxploitation films, where you had the superfly characters, you had the Dolemite characters, guys who were just cool, and they just became legendary in the hood. Man, them guys are cool. But from the consciousness of those who felt, is this where we want? Are these the models we want for our kids?
Well, that brings up a good point. So I wasn't there. I was like barely a dream in my daddy's balls when these Dolemite movies were coming out. So I mean, clearly there's dichotomy. There's all kinds of representation. Like if you were just to watch a Dolemite movie with the sound down, how much visually is accurate to the times, and how much of it is it just fabrication? I mean, how much is documentary, I guess you should say, in terms of what that era felt like, what it looked like, how people acted and behaved?
Well, the whole thing is, what I was touching on is the problem of spectatorship, and how, as a people who, based on white supremacy, we are not able to live the way we should be able to live. And so there are a number of people from a black consciousness, a black nationalistic perspective, where they say we don't have the time for this nonsense. Where you have other people who say, hey, we're just like anyone else, and why not give us some opportunity to escape like anyone else, because we need it. So that's always the war.
Yeah, I mean, clearly, if you're objective, it's coon stuff going on in that movie, but it also feels, in these particular films, and we didn't even touch on Cliff Roquemore, who was the director of the final 3 Dolemite movies. He came out of theater. I think that there is a legitimate effort to represent a world there. Like even the characters, it's maybe a little amplified and cartoonish But
now Cliff Roquemore, if I'm not mistaken, because this is going back research, but he was married to one of the actresses. And
I think so.
Yeah. Okay, she's the one who played in Sounder Part 2. She was she did the Cicely Tyson role. I can't think of her name right now, but the beauty of blaxploitation was that you can have opportunities made available to a Cliff Roquemore, where a black can be in the position of direction and having that input, and that was the greatness of it.
Yeah, and the bonus features, they actually talk. He's passed away many years ago, but they have interviews with his two sons, who are featured in one of the Dolemite movies, as kid actors. I think it's Human Tornado. But yeah, I mean, I can't get enough of this stuff. I mean, this was like, I'm always getting on Criterion Collection for not putting out more black films. But who needs Criterion?
Let me just ask you.
Vinegar Syndrome.
Let me be devil's advocate right quick.
Yeah.
Reelblack, The Mission, and we're watching films now that are coming out, and Reelblack is saying, when the bow breaks, I want it more. Put yourself back in my place in the 70s, and I'm watching Dolemite. Do I make that distinction where can you see what Dolemite is and it's what it is? How would you compare it to something that may come out now and you could find something on that level as being inexcusable from the handiwork of blacks?
Well, I mean, if you want to draw the direct comparison, the parody of Dolemite is Black Dynamite. And people enjoy that. I mean, there's
and that didn't do any money.
It didn't make any money, but it spawned a whole series on Cartoon Network. It's a huge cult favorite. People love Michael Jai White. I mean, a lot of stuff isn't necessarily designed for the masses, and only certain people are going to get it. So even like Black Jesus, it took me a while to get that. It took me a while to get the Boondocks, but the fact that that stuff exists and it's satire and it speaks to a very specific representation of the community, I think is valid. When the Bow Breaks is just sort of a white film in blackface. They're there exploiting me for my money because they know that I really have a desire to see Taraji Henson, Morris Chestnut, Idris Elba in a escapist form of entertainment because I like them as actors. But the problem with those movies is they put more money into the poster than they do the actual scripts. And that's not something that generally happens when you see a white thriller with fairly major name actors that makes it to a theater. I mean, that When the Bow Breaks, if that shit was on Showtime or Lifetime or whatever, there'd be no issue to complain. But the fact that they're asking me to spend my $13, that's where I have a problem. Now, if you're talking about representation and stereotypes and all that stuff, I look at Dolemite in its very own specific galaxy. The fact that there's no reason why in a commercial environment that a movie as crazy as Dolemite would even exist, let alone 4 movies. And the fact that it's been rediscovered by a generation and it has some cult appeal, I think is fascinating. I put Rudy Ray Moore right next to a Russ Meyer, who was another independent filmmaker out of LA who use his own resources and financing to make better made movies than Dolemite, but a whole series of sexploitation things, and I'm generally a big fan of that sort of outsider exploitation cinema in the cases where it's not just pure exploitation, but there's some artistry behind it. That's why I was so excited when we had a chance to talk to Jack Hill on the radio show, because here's a guy who basically was a contemporary of Francis Ford Coppola, but somehow he got saddled into doing low-budget exploitation film. And the reason why you can still look at a coffee today has as much to do with Pam Grier as it does Jack Hill as it does to Pam Grier, because he was looking at the opportunity within those resources they had to actually make something good. Whereas if you asked me to do a critique on Bad, the Black, and the Beautiful, I don't think I could do it.
Right.
If that shit was coming out on Blu-ray, I'd say use it as a coaster.
But not to belabor a point, but
Right.
Birth of a Nation makes how much money?
At this point, it's around 17 million.
17?
As of today, it'll probably get close to about 20, 25.
Okay, great. And Boo comes out and makes how much?
Opening weekend was 27.
Okay, 29, 27, 29.
27 opening weekend. It's as we speak, it has just crossed 30 million. the second week.
So we can have Boo? You don't mind if we get Boo?
Well, I mean, people know what they're getting in for. I'm not necessarily somebody that's going to say go spend $13 on.
Would you say like Boo is like compared to coming out at the time of A Birth of a Nation, the same way like a Dolemite would come out with a sounder?
Well, I mean, if we're going to go in, well, absolutely, yes. And I would say, for those who are Tyler Perry fans, Boo is probably the craziest Tyler Perry movie ever, because it's like he just doesn't care anymore. He's just going to give you entertainment, and you're either with him or you're against him. He's really basically abandoned any effort to give you anything more than what you want. And yeah, I mean, in some ways, the Medea character, there's a direct corollary between that and what Dolemite represented in the 70s. But I don't, having grown up in this time, I mean, maybe in 20 years or 30 years, Tyler Perry will be up for a major rediscovery, and people will be looking at Tyler Perry as a genius. I don't know. Time will tell. But I'm just super duper happy that Dolemite has finally made it to Blu-ray in a legitimate special edition. For me, I separate Dolemite as its own entity within that era, but they're just crazy movies.
Disco Godfather. Let's keep and creep the Disco Godfather.
But the last one is the most bizarre movie, because now it's PG rated Dolemite, and he's fighting crime. He's a one-man war on drugs, right? So and the original title was Disco Godfather, and then they planned it in '78. It got released in '79. So and it was basically trying to fight angel dust. Like, angel dust was the big drug on the street at that time. So Dolemite, he discovers that his nephew is hooked on angel dust, and he says, "Where is Bucky, and what has he did?" Right, and he goes and gets the. So he finds out that I don't want to spoil it, but he finds out that one of the local sort of like heroes is involved with the drug trafficking. So he gets together and fights it and everything. But it really completely destroyed Dolemite's career, and he's very open about it. He's very bitter about it, because they invested way more money in it than they had before, and but it was a message film, and people don't want that. And then the other thing was, it had disco in the title, so that was a hot thing in '78. But by '79, disco sucks, all that other stuff. So it just completely bombed. He lost all his money, and he never made another movie again. Not until the '80s, when they did some straight-to-video things. But it's just a strange movie, because they have no money, but they're trying to recreate drug trips, and there's there's this whole thing where he runs. He's the godfather of disco, like the whole opening where he's like showing his belt and dancing and stuff. I mean, it's clear he has no moves at all. But he's like, if you put Dolemite doing disco Godfather next to John Travolta in Saturday Night Fever, you'd be like, what the fuck does this guy? What is he on? That makes him think he can get away with this stuff.
And one of the things about that film, that they paid a lot of attention to try to make him look real.
Oh yeah, he's got a wig or some kind of Jerry curl thing and his mustache,
eyeliner, and oh my goodness, you know what I mean? You know, they worked on this, try to improve his looks or whatever, but that was a bomb, real bomb. There's so many things that went against it being a success, but I think what's interesting is you always want to look at who else is featured in these films. Who played Bucky?
Where is Bucky, and what has he had?
The actor who played Bucky, many people confuse him with Tony Todd. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the old guys getting old, the minds, but I believe Bucky is the guy who did the role in The Last Dragon.
Sho'nuff?
Sho'nuff.
Bucky! The doctor said you was gonna be all right. What? What about my arm, man? Bucky, what are you talking about? How can I play when I ain't got no...
There's a scene in, just one anecdotal, there's a, because I'm seeing this in the theater, The Devil's Son-in-Law, Peter Wheatstraw. Now Cliff Roquemore, you can research the actress who played Sounder 2, but there's a scene where she's on the bed and they start where the guy's kissing up her leg, right, her bare leg, and he's kissing up the leg, and we're in the audience. We say, ooh, we hear there's just a one united, ooh, you know, ooh, and as he's getting close and close, ooh, and then when he gets to her face, people say, oh. And I said, oh my goodness,
well,
that had to be.
That's the other thing.
That had to be embarrassing, because Cliff Roquemore, if he did a, you know how they do testing for films, that had to be not only embarrassing for him, but I felt a lot of pain for maybe the actress who was his wife. You know, because you know we have this European culture, the standard, and so she's very dark, and so you know we growing up on a standard, and they'll look at her as like she was ugly.
Right. Well, she didn't have to be in the theater while you were watching it. But I mean, one of the funniest things in a Dolemite movie is in Human Tornado, when he hooks up with this girl. I mean, and some of the sex scenes are played off as fantasies and things like that. Like when Cliff Roquemore takes over the franchise, he takes the next step further in terms of cartoonish and not necessarily, although Peter Wheatstraw is a little more grounded in reality, but Human Tornado is even more crazy and comic book like, almost like if you were watching a Funkadelic or Parliament album. Like if George Clinton came to life, he'd probably make a Dolemite movie, but if he made a movie, it'd be like Dolemite would be in it. So there's one scene when he hooks up with this girl in the bar, and they go to the hotel or whatever to make out, and they start having sex, and then they're like, I guess he's going down on her, and then they cut to them eating ribs together at the bar, and they're just like eating the ribs up, you know. But, so you never see anything, but when you cut to the moment where you expect it, it's like, you know, just crazy. Just how does stuff like this get made, and where does it come from?
You know, the whole thing with Dolemite, technically, there could be a half a star, but the fun, the enjoyment you get out of it is 5 stars, because it's very hard not to just bust out cracking off Dolemite, and that's what makes it so unique and will go down in history.
Yeah, and the first Dolemite, you know, so many people saw it in the VHS version, which was formatted square, because it was shot square, but when in the theater they cut off the top and bottom, so they actually give you the square version, which they call the boom mic edition, because like every other shot there's a mic sticking out of the top of the frame, and that's like a lot of people are like, that's another reason for laughter. That could be a drinking game, you know, take a shot every time you see a boom mic in the Dolemite movie. So So check those out. And shout out, thank you, Vinegar Syndrome, for sending those for us to preview. And, you know, it's big news. Dolemite on Blu-ray.
Yeah. See it at a theater near you.
Or you put your weight on it.
The reason why Donald Trump is where he's at, if we relate it to film, I think there's some films people need to see that point to the danger of why Donald Trump is so important with his cult of personality.
What makes me mad is all the gangbangers, right? Mm-hmm. All the gangbangers that are supposed to be banging and shit. Okay, the cops are killing us. Why aren't you shooting at them for us? What happened, gangbangers? All of a sudden they at home and shit. Motherfuckers are at home. We're all these tough gangbangers. We need you. Hello? Hey, man, the Italians got mafia. Like, the Italians, you know what I love about the mafia, the Italians? They protect their neighborhoods. They protect their neighborhoods. They protect their people. We're the only motherfuckers that have no mafia. Black people don't got a mafia. We can't even organize crime.